Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the OK Grognard Show. It is Wednesday, November 4th, 2020, 10 a.m. Central in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Well, it's Wednesday, and that means it's Campaign Discussion Day. Good morning, Sarah. How are you today? Let's see. What have we got on the book? Oh, yeah. We're going to be looking at some 1E First Edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons stuff from the Dungeon Master's Guide. How unusual for this show. We'll be looking at time. Time. Classic conundrum of time. Time's pretty good for RPGs, you know? I mean, if you want to measure anything, the importance of anything, you know, whether it's the reign of a king or a queen, you can use lineage charts with years. You can use months, days if there's a crazy uprising or assassination attempt in a kingdom where some despot has put himself up above everybody else. You can measure how long it takes to get that sword made in days or weeks so that you're ready to do battle, to fight against evil that might be harming the land or hiding in the deep, dark reaches of a dungeon. You can use an hourglass. Yes, an hourglass to keep track of how long a spell is lasting. There are also graduated candles that help keep track of time. Of course, you've got sundials dating back to, in the real world, to prehistoric times, seemingly. People would keep track of things based on the sun, the shadows that fell off of things, even if they were makeshift sundials in that sense, keeping track of the day by the lengthening shadows, by how far the sun was still up in the sky. When is the day ending? When does it begin? Can we come out of our caves and trees and venture forth for food and not be too worried about predators because we can see them for a change? This is good. So, time is the fourth dimension, right? It's important for games, and let's think of it in terms of the game of First Edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Let's look at time in the campaign. We'll see. I know I've got a lot to say about parts of this, I'm sure, because the game has evolved. I've evolved as a DM. Different things, different priorities have taken hold in general, I think, in gaming, but also specifically in my own life and in my own world, setting-wise. There are things I did that were probably much more by the book based on what I'm going to be reading today. Much more by the book that I would follow back in the day that not necessarily anymore now. But let's dig into it and let's get an idea what's going on here. Time in the campaign. Game time is of utmost importance. Well, there you go. See, now I don't necessarily agree with that, although it is on the priority list. Failure to keep careful track of time expenditure by player characters will result in many anomalies. How important those are is up for grabs, I think. Will result in many anomalies in the game. The stricture of time is what makes recovery of hit points meaningful. Kind of true. I think it's fair to say that after a certain number of levels, there's enough inherent magic, let alone consumables like scrolls and potions, let alone magic items like wands and rods and staves and whatever else that can cure unguents. Anyway, how meaningful is the recovery of hit points once there's so much magic that resting for hit points is no longer a thing? I think in my last 1E campaign, even though we kept that restriction of if you go below 0, you don't die until you're 10 under that, losing a hit point every round, but if you get stabilized and then brought back up to 0 or better, you're not going to die. And I make those rolls, those system shock rolls and that sort of thing. And if you're resurrected, so too, resurrection save rolls and system shock rolls for that. But the hit points themselves would usually get cured up by magic after a certain level. It's like 3rd, 4th, 5th level on up. I think hit points are a lot less meaningful in regard to time. They're still important, obviously, but time is not a factor anymore in regard to their importance. Likewise, the time spent adventuring in wilderness areas removes concerned characters from their bases of operation, be they rented chambers or battlemented strongholds. True, certainly. The most important time stricture pertains to the manufacture of magic items. For during the period of such activity, no adventuring can be done. This is a campaign-specific concern. I think it's probably true that a lot of campaigns more readily, let's throw me in the corner here. I think it's probably true that a lot of campaigns and DMs, and certainly it's true with adventure modules and that sort of thing, that often you find that magic items within treasures tend to either be more, I don't want to say generic, but more universally useful. I'm going to find a lot more +1 longswords than I am going to find +1 or even +2 or more glaives in treasures, in adventure modules, even back in the day. So there was already this tendency to try to ensure that much of what was found magic-wise in treasures was going to be useful. If you're adventuring enough that you're gaining enough magic items through treasures to feel secure enough and strong enough to continue to adventure more without having to take time away from adventuring to manufacture magic items, which is something, I tell you what, in 46 years of GMing, very rare that someone wanted to take time away from the adventuring portion of the campaign, even when there were not pressing concerns that would, a princess needs to be rescued. The Mad King is slaughtering his subjects over on, whatever you want to say about back in the day tropes that were adventure hooks. Feel free, but when these things popped up, adventurers would have to spring into action. So you couldn't just sit around and do. But there were times, always in adventurers or in adventuring groups, in campaigns, where one goal was completed, one activity, one mission was handled, and problems were solved, And then there was a lull. What do you want to do next? Were there other hooks along the way that you didn't clean up that you want to pursue right away? Do you want to kick back? Do you want to spend time in town? So there were times when there was some free time, some ability to say, "Hey, look, you know what? We're gonna take 13 weeks and we're gonna make ourselves a staff of the this or that." And even that was just incredibly rare. So the most important time strictures pertains to manufacture of magic items. During that period, no period of such activity, no adventuring can be done. If you read that sentence to mean that it's insanely important to keep track of this, if they're going to do that, or make it clear that it takes time, then yeah, that's easy to agree with if it's understood. If you ignore those restrictions, how long it takes to make magic items, and you just allow players to collect enough treasure and then say, well, I'm gonna make a staff of the this or that. How much does it cost? Oh, this much. Okay, can we move on? Let's get back to adventuring. I got my staff, right? Yeah. If you're playing a game that's like that, then you've certainly allowed time to become a non-factor in your campaign games. And if that's what you like, sure. Time is also considered in gaining levels and learning new languages and more. All of these demands upon game time force choices upon player characters, and likewise number their days of game life. All right. Can't disagree with that kind of stuff. Have to question whether or not they're understanding that some of these pursuits are not going to be of interest to certain players. I don't want to say most players, maybe. A lot of players, probably. Some players, at the least, some players. Some players are at least not going to consider taking time out of adventuring and those aspects, exploration, to manufacture a magic item, to learn a new language. Gaining of levels, that's something that I've always found from campaign to campaign to be a sort of a nebulous bugaboo. I think it's quite possible that longer campaigns where people have multiple characters, each player has a sort of a stable of characters that they'll dip into based on the demands of the adventuring they're planning on doing. We got a bunch of 5th level characters being put together to go into this particular crypt. Let me dig through my characters and find something, a 4th or a 5th or a 6th level character that can travel with that bunch. So if you're playing games that way, then you can just set aside a character for a while to do that training, to make those magic items, to spend that time. So is it still meaningful time if you can just play other characters and the time marches on? Something to think about. One of the things stressed in the original game of D&D, Gary continues, was the importance of recording game time with respect to each and every player in a campaign. In AD&D, it is emphasized even more, one of the few places he goes all caps. It means the same thing as it does in an email or a text. He wants to emphasize this. You cannot have a meaningful campaign if strict time records are not kept. Clearly, that's an opinion. Meaningful is a subjective thing. This is not a fact-based statement. So I don't doubt that Gary means it from the perspective of his own DMing and his own campaign. I don't doubt that most, probably, if not all, of his players that played in campaigns that he ran understood that was a strict part of the campaign and was going to be, and they bought into it, engaged with it, and enjoyed it for the most part. I'm sure they thought of it as here's another obstacle to overcome. It's going to take weeks to do this thing. Well, we really need it, so we're going to buckle down. And yeah, that's all cool. I get it. I get how that is a thing of importance in certain campaigns, and it's certainly clear it was in his. I'm not so sure that's still true for even campaigns that are run using these first edition AD&D rules for everyone. Again, I'm not going to make the call. Most, some, all, a few. I'm not going to say one way or another. I'm just going to say that's not universally true. At least not for games now. And you know what? I played in campaigns back then. I was playing since '74. This came out in '79. I was not yet an adult. I wasn't 18, or I wouldn't be for another year or so. But been playing a while, and I gotta say, for our campaigns to be meaningful, we didn't need to be. I am taken by the fact that he used all caps and was so absolute in the way that he phrased this, because I get that's his thing. I don't know that it was for everybody, nor that it had to be. Make of that what you will. Use whatever grouping of days you find desirable in your milieu. Bing! There is nothing wrong with 7 days a week, 31, 30, 28, 29 days a month, whatever, which exactly corresponds to our real-world system. On the other hand, there is nothing to prevent you from using some other system if it pleases you, like 6-day weeks, 5 weeks a month, 12 months a year, 360 days. Is that too easy? That's what I do. That's simple. It makes it very simple for me and for players, and to explain it. It doesn't often come up in games and campaigns I run. I might keep track of it behind the scenes, and it just not even come up. Well, it's going to be this many weeks, I'll say. And I won't get into that. Well, are they 6-day weeks? Are they 7-day? I'll just say it's going to be this kind of a chunk of time. And usually, as long as that's agreed upon and virtually understood, why spend an hour of game time when you can only get together a few times a month discussing the intricacies of a calendar? Probably not worth it. I mean, it's important to be able to say, oh, hey, there's a harvest festival coming up. You're one town away from the county seat, whatever. So maybe you want to go join in the festivities. All right. It can be something that's very flavorful for a campaign. It does not have to be something that becomes a straitjacket for your players or a time-consuming bookkeeping obstacle for them if they don't find that kind of stuff fun. What is important to the campaign is that you do, in fact, maintain a time record which logs the activities and whereabouts of players and their henchmen. Yeah, well, you know what? In large groups, if they're not staying together, you definitely got to keep track of that stuff. For the sake of example, let us assume that you begin your campaign on day 1 of the year 1000. There are 4 player characters who begin initially, and they have adventures which last a total of 50 days, 6 days of actual adventuring, and 44 days of resting and other activity. 44 days of sitting on your ass. That was fun. Well, maybe, but in campaigns I run, those 44 days are often taken care of in a handful of sentences in 5, 10, 15 minutes. Every now and then, I will not pressure or pace a group, and I will just sit back and let them just run off about the stuff they're going to do in town. Every now and then, I'll chime in with a, well, okay, if everybody's taking care of all the stuff they want to take care of, you know that you want to head back on a certain day several weeks from now. You just want to mark off this many weeks worth of food or money for inns or upkeep or whatever. We'll just move forward on the timeline till this day. I'll tell you what, almost invariably somebody chimes in and says, oh yeah, but I still wanted to go to the swordsmith. So I go there and I say, hey, Mr. Swordsmith, what could you do for me if I wanted a custom sword that was like this or that? Better yet, show me your wares. We were literally just about to hand wave 6 weeks of gaming, and now sorry about that, we've magnified back in on a moment in time when somebody's having a casual conversation with a purveyor of swords. One player, well, 4, 6, 8, 9 other players are sitting around having just expected to move forward however many weeks so they could get back to it. And now somebody said, hey, let's talk swords. Just me and one man in town. Okay. So watch out for that sort of thing. Because I'll tell you what, when it comes to time, the time in the game is important. What's more important to me is the time that all of these individuals have taken out of their busy real life schedules to come together and play a game. And I desperately will try my best not to waste their time. If one player wants to get into the intricacies of swordcraft, read a book. You're not going to have 9 other players sitting around while you play for a half hour on your own, role-playing with a swordsmith. Just not going to happen. Anyway, that's a rant. At this point in time, 2 new players join the game. One of the original group decides to go seek the advice of an oracle after hiring an elven henchman, and the remaining 3 old boys decide they will not go with the newcomers. So, on day 51, player A's character was off on a journey. Those B, C, and D are resting on their laurels, and E and F enter the dungeon. The latter pair spend the better part of the day surviving, but do well enough to rest a couple of game days and return for another try on day 54, where they stumble upon the worst monster on the first level. Surprise it! And manage to slay it and come out with a handsome treasure. You pack it in for the night. 4 actual days later, and it is best to use 1 actual day equals 1 game day when no play is happening. That's an interesting thing. To advance in-game time based on how much real world time is passing. What if a game gets canceled? Another week goes by if you're playing in a weekly game, another week goes by within the game world because so and so had a doctor's appointment and we didn't want to play without them. I don't think that's cool. I don't keep track of in-game time based on real-world time. We freeze time in game when we stop. On day 55, players B, C, and D enter the dungeon and find the area they selected has already been cleaned out by player characters E and F. Had they come the day after the previous game session, game day 52, and done the same thing, they would have found the monster and possibly gotten the goodies. What to do about that? And what about old A and his pointy-eared chum off to see the Oracle? Some penalty must accrue to the non-active, but on the other hand, the overactive cannot be given the world on a silver platter. Despite time differences, the activities of the newcomers to the campaign should be allowed to stand, as Destiny, capital D, has decreed that the monster in question could not fall to the characters B, C, and D. Therefore, this creature was obviously elsewhere, not dead, when they visited its lair on day 52, but it had returned on day 56. Being aware of time differences between the groups of player characters will enable you to prevent big problems. This is a big problem. You will know when the adventuring of one such group has gone far enough ahead in the game, in game time, to call a halt. This is particularly true with regard to town/dungeon adventures. Oh yeah, I gotta do that, and I gotta do that. There we go. There we are. Okay, well, this whole example is not the way I run, and certainly, if you're going to run multiple groups in the same setting and act as if they are within the same timeline in the same adventuring world, then you've got to allow for sometimes that one group might just tee it up for another group to pretend that they're on altering timelines and to remove an obstacle from one group so that it is there for the other group when they get back to playing. I mean, you can do that, but it seems like you're playing favorites with this one while you're arguing that you're trying to avoid unfairness to this one. You know, it's all a matter of perspective. So I would have to say, I don't know. I don't generally run multiple groups through the same campaign role at the same time. I will sometimes run a group with a certain number of players as a sort of quorum. If I have a group of 8 or 9 players and I get at least 5, 6, 7 of them, we won't cancel. We'll still play, and so-and-so's off back holding the leashes of the dogs and the reins of the horses while everybody else is in the dungeon or whatever. I don't let a character I don't let a character get dragged along by the group with the possibility of dying when a player's not there. Like somebody's character can't die in absentia. I don't want them to be able to help out if they have items. And this has come up before in campaigns. If they have items that you want with the group when their character is not going to be there, make some arrangement with them as a player. Can we hang on to your bag of holding? Can we? Your crystal ball is going to be crucial. We do have someone else that can use it, so it's vital to our plan for the next thing we're tackling. And I know you can't be there because you're on vacation, or you'll be out of town on business or some such. But can you leave this item behind with the rest of the group? make some arrangement for those sorts of things. I'm not going to read on the rest of this because it's a muddle that doesn't necessarily apply, and it's more of a logistical. Um, this player, that player is around. This player isn't. Here's a couple more days in the calendar. Here's continuing. And what about when the DM wants to go on hiatus? Okay. Well, if it's their campaign world, then do you let another DM use your setting? That's a good question. I don't. Somebody else wants to run something on a week when I can't be with the group. I always say, hey, go for it. You run an adventure in this other system or in the same system in your setting, or get together and play a board game. Just because I can't be there doesn't mean you can't get together as a group. If I'm your regular DM, I encourage people get together and play other things anyway, because you enjoy each other's company. That's what a lot of this is about, in the sitting around. So skipping ahead, I don't know. You know what? We're going to get to time in the dungeon too later on. So I'm going to leave this off as a part 1. We'll come back to this next week as a part 2 and discuss more of this. There are some salient points in some of the rest of this. It's not all unusable based on what we've discussed in the previous. So we'll come back for a part 2 of this, and then we may even have a part 3 if we don't get to keeping track of time in the dungeon. That's its own thing, possibly. So we'll see if we need to summarize what's left in that first section there and then come back and jump right into this, or if there's enough meat on the bones to pick from the second half of that other stuff there above, and then a third part for time in the dungeon. Either which way, hey George, how you doing? New scouts and trap finders, huh? Yeah, if a player isn't there, their character is out front, paving the way, getting tripping traps and taking names. That's their thing, huh? That's a good one. Anyway, I'll tell you what, that's the end for today, we'll say, and we'll say thank you to everybody who follows the channel, and who, especially if you're chiming in on the stream chat, it's very much appreciated. We'll also say, don't forget the rest of this week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday actually, are all days where these will be 50-minute seminars tied to Gamehole Con. So come back and join us, 10 a.m., the usual time. The same type of subjects. We'll be doing GMing tips tomorrow. We'll be doing building adventures on Fridays. Both of those will be kind of convention-based or oriented. GM reviews. Maybe we'll look at this past year. This is probably the last virtual convention I'll be part of this year, 2020. So maybe we should look back at GaryCon and Tabletop Events Convention and Greyhawk Con and Virtual Autumn Revel, and then of course we'll take a look at how much we know about Gamehole Con at that point. It's going to be Saturday. We'll have a good feel for how it's been going. So we can look at all that stuff, kind of a year in review, a train wreck in review. So GM reviews, let's do that. And what we can gain as GMs from looking at what has transpired. Rules retrospective on Sunday. Still not sure what I'm going to do with that, but it'll be something for 50 minutes. Hey, thanks everybody. If you're catching up with this on YouTube, please do subscribe to the channel. Give us a thumbs up on any videos you watch, and also feel free to make comments if you have some constructive criticism to help make the show better. That's always a good thing. If you just want to give us an old attaboy or a warm fuzzy, we appreciate it. If you're just looking to get nasty, go ahead. I know how to delete shit. Anyway, there you go. It's the OK Grognard Show, 10 a.m. every day, 7 days a week, from beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Bye-bye.